Well, look who's back, your favorite group of troublemakers, asking us all the difficult questions about creativity, art, and design, and hopefully we heard some feelings along the way. This is the Woodworking is Bullshit podcast. I'm your host, Paul Jasper of Copper Pig Woodworking, and I'm joined by your favorite co-host, Thirst Traps, Mary Tsai, professional AI designer by day and Kodamari Furniture by night, and Eric Curtis, professional furniture maker. Very official. As usual, we like to start every show with a question. So, Eric, I think you have another hot button topic for us today.
I do. The question right off the top of my head is it pronounced Kodamari? I was assuming it was Kodamari the whole damn time.
It can be whatever you want, but it is Kodamari.
Oh, look at that. Okay. All right. Now for the real question. So, this is a question I think about often, and I debate with myself often, and I'm curious to hear your opinions on it. And I'll phrase it in two different ways, because I think there's a lot to parse out here. But at its core, the question is, where do we draw the line between craft and art? Right? Or to phrase it a different way, can we differentiate between craft and art? So I used to be of the opinion that art was about the intention, right? That the artist's aim in getting you to engage with an object, to feel a thing, to experience a thing, was a vital component in what makes a piece of art, right? It's what makes a thing transcendent, right? That universal experience of just, it could be something as simple as, this is the most beautiful damn thing I've ever seen in my life. And we all connect to it in a way that makes us experience that object differently from just a really well-crafted object. So the craft, on the other hand, is almost the engineering, right? The making of the thing. So you have the art is the why and the craft is the how, if you will. But I think what that does is it puts art on an elevated level. It puts it above craft in a big way. And I don't think that is, I don't think it's a fair pedestal to put craft on. Because over time, I've come to the conclusion that they may be inextricably linked, right? So in order for a piece of art to be art with a capital A, it has to have a high level of craftsmanship, right? And the act of creating, right? The act of craftsmanship may be art in and of itself.
Right.
The act of creating may be the definition of art. So I'm wondering if we can parse the two apart and say this is art and this is craft, or is it impossible to separate the two? And do they just live on a spectrum somewhere, maybe? Because you can't have one without the other, perhaps. This is what I contend with often. Can you make a piece of art, like a true, beautiful, transcendent piece of art, that is not the result of years of training in the craft, whatever that craft may be, painting, sculpture, woodworking, music, right? The performance of art is also another element of craft, right? The act of creation. So I'll ask again, because we love labels. Where do we draw the line between art and craft?
So can I start with the definition of each? Like, let's look up the definition.
Are we gonna go? We're gonna go Merriam-Webster's on this bitch already?
Yeah. Let's do the Oxford Dictionary, and let's just start with how they define art and craft. Okay, and Eric, I think you raised wonderful points, and we'll get to a lot of those. So let's start with craft. An activity involving skill in making things by hand. An activity involving skill in making things by hand.
I wonder if
Okay.
that definition isn't shifting with the invention of CNCs in CAD and all of the other non-human components of it.
Let's put a pin in that. Let's stick a pin in that. Because that's another good point. And let's go to the definition of art.
You don't have
Because
to look it up because it's just going to be a picture of me.
No, that's if I Google designer.
If I had said that, the amount of hate that I would have gotten. Wow. Touche.
I thought you were the picture under designer, Mary, not artist.
If you look up the antonym to humility, though, also another photo.
Fucking antonym. I don't think I've used the word antonym in the last 20 years.
I don't think I have either. As soon as I said it, I was like, is that the word I'm looking for?
All right, go on.
All right. Definition of art. The expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in visual form, such as painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. So the first definition of craft had the words involving skill in making things by hand, right? Making, and the art had expression, human creative skill, imagination, visual works appreciated for their beauty and emotional power. So I can see the distinction. One is about the how, Eric, as you said earlier, and the other is about what, like, it's art is like it seems to be a bigger term involving emotion and expression. Is how I read these definitions.
And frankly, I disagreed with that definition until the very end when they brought it back around with the emotional experience, right? The thing I would push back with in tell me if you're reading this differently is that definition felt to me as though they were placing the definition of art from the perspective of the viewer, right? The person interacting with the artwork, not from the perspective of the artist. And I think the intention of the artist in the act of creation is hugely important to how we define art. And I think that bears witness in contemporary art, right? We're going to have this argument at some point during this conversation about, like, is a cube in the middle of a room letting a cube of chocolate, for example, I can't remember the artist's name off the top of my head, but a cube of chocolate just melting in the middle of a museum room, is that art?
A banana stuck to a wall with duct tape.
Right. And so, but that does speak to the intention of the artist. The artist in the infamous banana duct tape scandal, the intention of the artist was to show how absurd the process of that art show was, right? And of art collection in general. So you stick a banana on the wall and you charge whatever, he charged $50,000 for it or something, and somebody buys it. And yet simultaneously it's performance art. It's an object and it's the performance, the act of doing the thing simultaneously. So it's this weird art loving for art's sake.
So let me put a finger on this then, Eric, and get you to commit to your definitions, because you've been waffling a little bit.
This is why it's hard.
Do you agree with the definitions from Oxford that one's primarily about making and handcraft and skill, and the other's about more of an expression? I mean, do you fall down those lines, roughly speaking?
Very roughly. I would hesitate to agree, but I think on principle I would have to agree. I would use the word intention more than expression.
Okay, so there's an intention in art, and not necessarily there doesn't have to be an intention in craft.
I think there is an intention in the experience of the end user or viewer in art, right? What am I trying to get you to experience?
And that doesn't exist in craft.
Well, but this is why it's messy, because I think the goal of a craftsman, again, these are broad strokes, but I think the goal of a craftsman, generally speaking, is to create a beautiful object.
Or craftswoman, as the case may be. Mary, what do you think?
Or craftsperson.
Or craftsperson. Yeah, let's be more gender inclusive.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like intention and I guess what, like concept? I guess like art is more driven by conceptual ideas and maybe deeper meanings, maybe not, but more often so. I feel like they're, yeah, I mean, the art is supposed to be like evoking emotions and maybe conveying a message or exploring some sort of, I don't know, maybe some sort of theme or something. But crafts generally places but more emphasis on, I think, skillful execution and um, maybe even on the aesthetics of the object as opposed to the, yeah, like maybe more of the visual aesthetics versus like the meaning behind it. But I don't know. Well,
I
the
don't
question
know.
I wanted to ask was like, do you, if you had to call yourself one or the other, which would you say?
All right, I think it was an evolution. I started as a craftsperson, I think, and I evolved. And I don't, I use the words evolved. That automatically is sort of derogatory. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I
See,
rose
exactly.
above the
Yep.
craftsperson, and I don't mean it that way, but I did evolve into a. I guess I see myself more as an artist now. I don't think I'm doing very well at it. I think I'm in my I'm a beginner artist. Like I have just started to be able to try and evoke meaning and thought and emotion from people through my pieces, but I don't think I do it very well. I think I'm quite a like I'm in like preschool, you know. Whereas I see some
I
artists
don't know
and
about
man,
that. I would argue that you're definitely above a lot of.
Eh.
I just feel like no really. I mean you could take all the shots you want because it's fine. I just like I see art sometimes and it like hits me like a ton of bricks. I
Mm.
don't know that I've been able to hit anyone with even one brick yet. So it's something I think about a lot, but it's very hard to do, which is how do you elicit emotion or how do you control the experience of the viewer or the owner with the piece? How about you? What do you think you
So,
are?
well, I'm going to disagree with you right off the jump that you haven't been able to evoke that emotional experience with you. But this is an interesting differentiation again, because I've seen your clients have deeply emotional
That's
reactions
true.
to the
That's true.
pieces that you've made. Now,
That's true.
the question is that a result of your high level of craft because they were already imbuing this object with some emotional
Mm,
substantial meaning, right? Because of the
It was given to
financial
them by a
investment,
loved
because
one.
of
Yeah.
exactly whatever the thing is, right? So that may be a workaround a little bit. Can you get that reaction out of a stranger, right? Who's never interacted with that object before, walks into a room, sees it, and has that reaction.
That's yeah. Great point.
But as far as how I define myself, it's a tricky one, right? Because I I got into woodworking because I thought of it as a craft. Because I
What is a
thought,
craft? That's the thing. Woodworking is
sure,
a hard is a difficult example because out of a lot of art forms, woodworking is literally crafting like physical material and being a craftsperson first.
it
Well, I don't know first.
it is, but haven't like let's take Nakashima as an example, right? You have a person who is a craftsman through and through, but I've seen people walk up to an object that he's made that is just a simple form, well executed, and have these deeply emotional reactions because the beauty of the form itself or of the material itself is overwhelming. And so it treads this line. And I got into woodworking because I grew up in the trades. I grew up building decks and houses, and there was a bit of that machismo, like I need to, be a man and build things with my hands, and I don't have emotions and I can't express things. And over time, I realized, oh shit, I actually am trying to do exactly that. And woodworking was a vehicle that allowed me to do that while tread that line somehow, right? But what's happened now is as I've attempted to break into the art world with air quotes to some extent, I've realized that so much of that world, like any, you know, uh, society, any group of people, it's about who you know more than what you know, right? And so in trying to break into that world, I found myself rejected over and over, and seeing works from other people. This just happened, and I won't name names and I won't name places. I applied to get into an art show and didn't get in with two pieces that I know were very strong pieces. And the person who not only got in but won first place, I looked at that work and I was like, that's horseshit. Like, it is not well crafted. It is not interesting. It is not good. What you did was you told a good story, which is absolutely a part of it. And for whatever reason, the gods shined upon you, and you were able to be featured in this show. And I realize now that my place is very much as a craftsman in the woodwork. And so like the 14-year-old boy inside of me is pushing back against the art world and be like, fuck you guys. I'm a woodworker. I'm not an artist.
So it was for an art show?
It was an art show, yeah.
So Eric, there's a study that was released by an information scientist. I'll have to look up the name. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he did a study of, I think it was 50,000 to 100,000 artists and their careers. And he tried to ask the question, what determines whether an artist will be big in the art world? I mean, being able to be shown in high-end galleries and will make good money or not? Is it the art itself, or is it who you know? And what his lab, and he's got a lab at a prestigious university. I'll find the info. I can't, but I remember the conclusion. The conclusion was, where you trained put you in touch with a group of galleries and a group of people, and that was basically the main determinant of whether you showed in high scale successful galleries or not. It was where you trained and who you knew. And if you trained at the prestigious place like MoMA, or your university was in bed with MoMA or whatever, your probability of staying in those circles was like 50 to 80%. If you came from nowhere and you're not in those high end circles, what's your probability of breaking into those circles? Which is sort of the case you're talking about. It's like, I'm a self-taught craftsperson. I didn't go to any prestigious, art school that it put me in touch with all these people. The probability out of all the people in that group, only a few percent, like single digit percent, were able to move into that group somehow. And it was probably through a relationship. I doubt it was their work. So
yeah.
the bottom line of all that research was, it's who you know and where you study. Yeah. It wasn't your art at all, which is kind of, that's kind of like that beats you up a little bit inside, because I think the boy in you says, if I make good enough stuff, people are going to love it.
It's the American optimism in me, for sure. For sure. But I think that also continues to then blur the line between art and craft, because you have artists who are not exceptional craftsmen in their field of study.
No,
who are
they just knew the right
successful.
People.
They just knew the right people. And then you have craftsmen who are, even throwing air quotes around that, or like we've already done multiple times in this conversation, we've put the craft below the art. Then you have these people who make truly magnificent objects that you can argue are works of art in and of themselves, who just don't get shown, don't get labeled as artists because, well, they're just making tables.
Well, let's be clear with each other. Who you know seems to be the bottom line in almost everything.
Sure. That's how the world works.
Right.
That's why I went to school. The advice I got at the beginning of my woodworking career, I talked to the guy who runs the Philadelphia Woodworking Show at the time. It was 2008 or 2009. And I was trying to figure out, after college, how could I be a woodworker? And he said, go to school, not because you can't learn the craft, but because of the people you'll meet. And that will be the thing that drives your career. And he was 100% right.
The same is with my career. I went to certain schools, and that gave me the job I have today because I was in the right place. I mean, you have to, like, doing well at art or doing well at your job is like, that's the price of admission. But beyond that, you need that network of humans that's going to help you get, to where you really want to be. Mary, you've been awfully quiet. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
About which part?
Anything, any part, please.
Okay.
How do you define yourself?
Never a good question. I Oh God. I mean, you both know I define myself as a designer, but that's not the question here. I think that it depends on what my project is. So last time we talked, I don't remember this. I don't know. I've had this conversation with many people, but like when I'm trying to come up with a project, when you get to that point in your design where you're like, it's almost there, but it's probably good enough. That for me is when I stop and I'm fine with like this is like a crafts person and it's like good enough for like my standard. So I'm just going to make sure I execute this well. But if I really want to do something that's a piece of art, I'm willing to spend that time to push it to when I'm like really happy that it conveys my message or my inspiration or etc. I'm like willing to put in that time, even if it takes like a week or two more to really figure it out. Then I think in my mind, it becomes more of the art side. In general, like I am not really that high of like a technical woodworker. I have like fair skills, and I don't know, I can build whatever I want to build usually. But I don't spend the time to really like hone my technical skills. I want to make sure that I produce the product. I want to make sure it's like done really well, obviously, but for me, it's more about that final execution and that final piece rather than making sure that everything is technically like perfect and proficient.
So we talked about craft versus art. Where does designer fit in?
I don't know, to be honest.
Is that like a third category?
I think it might be. I think it might be a contemporary category.
Right. So, I mean, I think did we talk about this in the last one? But like design usually has some sort of problem that is being solved. And it's usually something, I guess it's maybe for the purpose of solving an issue. And that is not the case in art. Maybe it is in craft, which is why in my job, a lot of people say you have to have really high craftsmanship in, for example, like product design or UX design or digital design, because that is one of the criteria of judging whether or not it's good UX. I don't know. Craft is it's such a subjective, vague, general term that I feel like you can apply it to any field, though.
What does UX stand for the Luddites among us?
Luddites.
User experience. That's my job. I make sure that users have good experiences.
It's interesting to me because I've never in my life have I associated the word craftsmanship with digital design, right? And that doesn't mean I'm trying to say that it doesn't take a high level of craftsmanship. It's just interesting to hear you guys have that conversation using that language.
So the goal of a good UX designer is to make sure that the user doesn't notice anything. So bad UX is when you're super frustrated with something and you're like, why can't I just like figure this form out? Or like, why can't I figure out the software, etc. It's bad UX. Good UX is something that is so intuitive and so like well designed that the designer anticipates the user's needs and they don't even need to think about whether or not like, oh, this is like a great sort of program I'm using.
See, this is interesting. So this from that question of where does designer fall on this spectrum, like I could make the argument that in itself is kind of like that's one branch of art, right? Like this idea of trying to intuitively get somebody to do a thing or experience a thing without them even noticing, that is part of that user experience, that the definition, back to Oxford or whatever we pulled, like that's what they're talking about, is that thing of you are having this experience and you don't even know that that's what the artist intended you to do.
That's a very interesting way to put it, Eric.
So I am an artist. Basically.
Yeah.
Well, let's not get cocky here.
You've kind of convinced me that like designer like is under the umbrella of artist because it has intentions and it has a goal and it's about it driving someone's experience. It's a very thoughtful point. I like that.
But it also kind of it is the engineer, right? Like designers are kind of the engineers as well. They are the problem solvers before you act. So I think the act of creation as an artist is sloppy and messy. And oftentimes you don't know where you're going until you're going there. And I think design is very much the opposite of that, right? It is I'm going to do all of the planning and math and mapping before I ever pick up any material whatsoever.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong, Paul, but I do think there is a fundamental tension there.
Interesting. All right. I want to tell you guys a story that Trent Presler told me once. I think you'll like this.
I love Trent.
You know Trent. Yeah, we all love Trent.
Yeah.
He's wonderful. And he's definitely going to be on this podcast at some point. I haven't asked him yet, but as you know, Trent, he both is the he was, or I think he still is the CEO of Bedell Cellars, which is a vineyard on Long Island. And as a result of running a vineyard, they get pretty high profile guests to their vineyard for events. And he told me a story where the director of MoMA was there. And as you also may know, Trent makes very expensive canoes that upset a lot of people at the price point of $100,000 for a canoe. And you know what the question was always like, the crafts people get so upset, like, what about this canoe? He hasn't made more than a few canoes in his life. How dare he ask that kind of price? And Trent like put so much. He made canoes that the world had never seen before, with exotic woods and hand engraved like caps and the most hand forged wrought bronze cutwaters, and I mean the nicest hand done leather. I mean, really, like everything you could do about this canoe was of the finest quality, and the world had never seen so many beautiful pieces of craft or whatever you want to call it put in one canoe. I mean, it really was transcending the word canoe. I mean, it's still functionally a canoe, but it was more like a piece of art, right? So as I recall the story, and Trent, forgive me if I'm telling it wrong, but you were talking with the director of MoMA at the time about it. Well, is your canoe art or is it craft?
His canoes get used.
They're used, yeah. The owners use them occasionally. Otherwise, they're up on a 50-foot ceiling in their mansion. But, is that canoe art? And the director of MoMA was like, no. Your canoe is definitely not art. It is craft. And he goes, your canoe would be art. Like this would be art. Is if you sailed that canoe into the middle of the lake and poured gasoline all over it and blew it up in a ball of fire and it sank. That is art. And I was like, oh. So
must be nice to love the smell of your own farts.
Like that's art, destroying the canoe. Like that would be a work of art. It basically is basically saying like the act of destroying.
It's performance art.
Yeah, I guess it's performance art. So I mean, again, forgive me if I have any of the details wrong, but that was his definition of art. Would be, say, like destroying it, for example. Not that you have to destroy it; you could do other things with it, I suppose. But what did you guys think of that?
I mean, it seems. This is why, like, the subjects are always so subjective. It's always just personal preference. But, like, I don't know. It seems like that guy's definition of art has to do with performance and having to tell a narrative and a story and, like, a transformation. Maybe, like, transformation is, like, a big part of the art world right now. But he also, I don't know anything about him. Is this Glenn? I don't know.
I'm not sure who it was at the time. That's why I don't give a name.
Because, like, is he a woodworker? Because in the woodworking world, I'm 100% sure, like, all woodworkers would say, yes, that is art. But someone outside of the field might be, like, I don't know.
That's the point I was going to raise. It sounds to me, it reeks to me of elitism, right? That the separation of material is really important in the art world. You made a thing out of wood, and unless you destroy it, it can't be art. Right? So it's frustrating to me because I don't think he's wrong. I don't think, like, you could absolutely make the case that making a point, like Trent knowing his backstory, knowing his relationship with his father, why he started building canoes, to then take that out into the water and destroy that as an act of catharsis and try to articulate that to viewers, to people. I think that absolutely is art. But to say that the boat itself is not art because it's not doing that, just because it's a beautiful object, is somehow lacking, I think that reeks to me of elitism, and it's wildly frustrating.
Or
And
maybe they're pushing, maybe they're so used to just seeing beautiful objects, they're like, that's not enough anymore to move the needle. Now you have to do something radical to really make us gasp. You know,
but now you're getting into the conversation of, are you making art or are you doing the thing to be accepted into the art community? Mm-hmm. Right. And those are two different things.
Yeah. He's also the director of contemporary art. So his view is most likely biased towards what is contemporary art, and which is, I don't know, maybe it's more performative rather than traditional, I don't know, old school.
Oh yeah, there's a contemporary artist who got shot on camera just to shoot himself. You know. Oh yeah. I forget his name.
One piece that always sticks out to me that really, it both frustrates me and fascinates me simultaneously. Do you guys know the artist Damien Hirst?
Yes.
Yeah.
The shark in the tank.
So here's the question, right? Here's the thing about the shark in the tank. For those of you who are unfamiliar, this is a shark that has been, it's dead. It's been, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like preserved.
Preserved, yes. And it's suspended in this tank. And that in and of itself is nothing special. I think the interesting thing about this piece, I think the artwork is naming the piece. The name of the piece is the physical impossibility of death in the mind of someone living. And the object itself means nothing until you sit with the statement made about the object in naming it the physical impossibility of death in the mind of someone living. And then once you sit there and you contend with the reality of what that brings to you as a living person and the object in front of you simultaneously, that experience, that exchange becomes something transformative. And so again, I can see what this director is trying to say about, like, you are trying to do something that's never been done before. But just because you did something new doesn't mean that what you already did wasn't art.
Also, ironically, if that's, I'm sure it's been done many times, being like something being destroyed.
Yeah,
that's true.
So I can't think of this person's name, but there was a craftsman who made this big, beautiful china cabinet. I think it was in the 80s.
I think I know what you're going to say.
It was technically perfect. It was beautiful. And then he took a giant iron spike and he drove it right through one of the doors.
Yep.
And just cranked it and destroyed the cabinet. And left it. And just left it there.
Oh, the artist I saw drove a huge nail into the middle of the cabinet and left it there. Yeah. And so that's part of the piece now.
Yeah, that's part of the thing. And so you have this object that went from craft to art because of the statement that he made by quasi destroying it. You know, so this is like, I can't remember the name of it. I'm sure you could Google it with some success, but it just, the line gets blurred, and it's a real Sneetches moment. You know what I mean? The haves and the have-nots.
Gary Knox Bennett. That's who
Gary
it was.
Knox Bennett.
Yeah.
Big giant cabinet. It's an and I don't know his intention in what statement he was trying to make, whether he was an artist trying to make a statement about woodworking or the other way around. But it's interesting to contend with contemporary art saying that what you do is not art because it's not good enough for us. And I don't know that I can accept that answer.
Someone's salty, Mary. You taste that on the? Someone's a little salty towards
Yeah,
contemporary
Little briny,
artists.
little
look
briny
at
today.
the dictionary.
Yeah.
It'll be Eric.
All right. Now I'll ask the two of you, and I'll answer myself. Is there a particular piece you've made that has pushed the most towards art and like moving the emotional needle, or like
Absolutely.
pushing the limit, pushing the envelope? What is it?
I think there are different iterations of that process over my career. So, very briefly, there are three pieces that come to mind. But the first time I think I accidentally made what I would consider to be art is a table that I don't remember if I've talked about it on the podcast yet. A table, I call it the Atlas table, based on the sculpture of Atlas in New York. It was a difficult time in my life, and I identified with this statue holding the weight of the world, and I was tasked with making a table. And then this thing came out. I didn't think about trying to make art. It was just the thing that was happening in me at the time. And somebody pointed it out to me that, like, well, what you just did was made art. And I was like, no. I'm a craftsman. I made a table. And he said,
You're
no,
the
like
hybrid, though. You're clearly like a artist, a Prius driving artist.
Prius.
The
Prius erases any artistry. Immediate disqualification.
But it was this moment of recognizing what I was attempting to do without realizing it was express my experience as a human in the world through this object, right? And like what else is art except you trying to articulate your human experience to other folks?
Yeah, that's fair. Mine's similar. I talked about this, I think, last time, but yeah, I think the piece for me was my Frank Lloyd Wright inspired one, because I saw his interpretation of the Tree of Life in his stained glass windows, and I was like, I want my interpretation of your interpretation of someone else's interpretation. So for me, it was my Tree of Life tables, because those were, and those were coincidentally the first pieces that I was really happy with, because I think it conveyed the message that I was trying to get across with, like, this is a somewhat original design, but not, I mean, it's clearly inspired by something, and I see it more in the art world rather than functional, although it is a functional craft piece.
So for me, and I've upset a few people with it, are the coffin jewelry boxes I made. Images of death seem to really get people stirred up. And I got some nasty messages. So I made these big jewelry boxes in the shape of a Victorian coffin. And you take the lid off the coffin and it looks like vertebra. It's like all these compartments for rings and earrings, and it looks like your rib cage or your vertebra. And then you lift that up, and inside there's more compartments for storage of larger jewelry. And these coffins really upset people. I got, why would you spend all that time making such a beautiful box and put it in the shape of something that represents death?
These people were never emo in their former, like,
no.
I can relate to this.
So, but despite the emo crowd not showing up on my page, a lot of people loved them. And they sold very fast. And furthermore, the newest cabinet I'm working on has a gigantic skull on the front of the cabinet. And again, I think that's upsetting people. And a lot of people were like, you ruined the cabinet. But maybe I think those are probably art. I mean, they're getting people to think about their own mortality. They're confronting so-called morbid images of death. I don't know if they're really morbid or not. I think about death all the time. I'm not particularly a morbid person. I'm a pretty positive guy, but I just find these interesting. I think coffins are interesting vessels. I think images of skulls are very cool. And they seem to stir people. So maybe it is art.
I think that could be an interesting place to differentiate. And this may be very individual in the experience of the end user, but art may require the viewer to engage with something beyond the object through their interaction with the object, right? It may require that they look at your coffin box and start considering death. And it may be that they look at a simple table that was made by an unnamed craftsman 100 years ago, and they're so moved by its beauty that they contend with the nature of beauty and goodness and contributing something beautiful to the world in society in their own time that they have on earth, right? So it may not be just in the intention of the maker, but I do think it requires some, and this is why I used the word transcendence before, like it may require some transcendence on the end user's part.
Yeah, but also people in general are like really into skulls and like weird like there's the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia where like it's actually a pretty controversial museum, and like people will go and just look at these like fetuses and like skulls and everything, and some people really like decorating their house like that. I don't know. I think it's more so
some people really like boats that are on fire as works of contemporary art. So, it's
yeah. I don't know. I mean, some people just like the like weird shit, and they don't know why, and that's fine.
All right, so I have another question about craft versus art. Let's poke the bear even more. You ready? 2 words. Price point.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm gonna say I'll be the unpopular opinion, or maybe not unpopular. They have different price points. I'm sorry, but they do.
They do, and
because it's so standardized and it's part of a tradition, it has so many examples to compare an object to, like Windsor chairs. Okay, they have tens of thousands of examples and price points to compare. Cutting boards.
Was the original Windsor chair craft or art? Because
it was craft.
Art. It started as
craft.
No, the original. The original has to be.
The original was craft.
No, the original was art.
It was made specifically for function. I disagree.
Oh, that may be, but that form had never been seen before, and it was like probably groundbreaking.
Is that the definition? Something that's never been seen before?
Well, usually the first of something tends to be so like jarring. The first time we've ever seen a form, it's like so jarring that you're like, holy shit.
I think what you're saying there is true, but I think the Windsor chair, that form, didn't.
Well, it probably didn't.
Out of nowhere. It evolved.
That's true. That's
from the
true.
thing before it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's also maybe why people like your skull boxes. It's very jarring to them, and they haven't seen anything like it before.
Yeah, I mean. That may be true. Okay, so back to price point. So I definitely think craft has an established price point, and you can go within like a multiple of like 2 times or 3 times the average craft price point for that item. But people are going to comparison shop and be like, why are you asking twice what I can get a very similar item for? Art has no price point. There are often no comparisons to it to be drawn.
This brings us to the question of production versus handmade. Right? So if you, Paul, make a box by hand that's one of a kind, and you've done this many times, you can charge far more for that object because it's the only object like that will ever exist. Even if you reproduce it by hand, it will be different versus an object that you batch produce. Or if you're an artist, the first time you paint a painting, it's going to be worth more than the prints that subsequently come after it. That's the nature of production, right? You're devaluing an object because there is more of it.
So scarcity.
I mean, that's economics 101, right? Scarcity is part of what drives up the price.
What about craft versus art and price point?
Well, so if you're producing a table, even if you're not a production quote unquote woodworker, if you are producing forms that have existed before, if you're making handmade barn tables, it's still a barn table. Versus if you attempt to make a form that has never been made before, or to your knowledge in your lifetime has never been made before, that's an entirely different thing. So naturally you can charge more for it because it's one of a kind.
So was the farmhouse table craft and the never seen before table art?
I don't, I don't know.
Oh,
It's
Jesus,
hard to
Eric, lay your bets
differentiate.
already.
It is hard to differentiate. I would say if I'm going to lay my bets, and I'm not going to hold hard to this definition, but if I am going to lay it down, I would say that the moment something is produced more than once, it ceases to be art. I know that's a shitty definition, is it not?
No way.
Okay. So argue that. Argue against it.
You made 2 of it and it's not art anymore? Come on.
Well, now it's a production piece.
Yeah, but it could still be art. I don't think that's it. I think the craft is often part of a tradition where there's many tens of thousands of examples that are all very, very similar. And art is something that just takes a fucking massive U-turn to go off to its own meaning, its own space. It lives in its own realm to some extent. I know it has.
Does Andy Warhol live in his own realm?
No. But I mean, in some ways, yes, but no, not exclusively. But art seems to just have some sort of deviation, and one doesn't have a price point, and one does typically. I'm sorry, that's the experience I can.
What do you mean by art doesn't have a price point, though?
You can ask anything you want because only one of them exists on the world, and it came out of you and your creative expression. And if you want that, you'll pay whatever price I.
Specific artists can ask whatever price they want.
Oh, sure.
Andy Warhol asked for his prices because he was Andy fucking Warhol. There's
Eric,
been 100 before and 100 since.
Eric, you've asked some pretty good prices on some of your pieces because they only exist through you. Now, they're not in the. We're not in the Andy Warhol or whatever the.
Yeah,
Jeff
I'm not
Koons,
making $50,000 a piece. Sure.
No, but you've been able to demand more for some of your pieces because they're so uniquely you, and you've transitioned.
They are that. And listen, I'm also not. I'm not naive to the fact that because there are more eyeballs on me, I've been able to ask more and produce more individualistic objects rather than go down the route of making batch products in objects that are more available to folks. I'm not naive to that, but I don't know. I don't know where you draw the line on that. I said it was a real shitty definition. I don't know where you draw the line because an artist can make a limited run. You can make 5 of an object, 10 of an object, and those are the only 10 that exist.
Well, do you think people buy your pieces for your name or because they want the aesthetic? Because that's also a thing. People definitely buy artists' work even though they don't really feel an emotional connection to it, but like they want the name.
So they feel an emotional connection to the person.
Yeah.
Somehow.
I was going to say that. Folks, people don't buy art. They buy the artist.
It's true. You've told me many times.
Yeah. Well, you look so good. I'd buy you.
If I'm honest, if I'm honest, like I think I'm good at my craft. I don't think I'm exceptional at my craft. I think what I am really good at is telling a story. And I think folks want to invest in a person attempting their best. And I do my best with every client I have. Doing their best to engage with a space, with an object, with a story, and trying to create something new for that space, for that family, for that moment in their life. I think that's why people pay me, not because I can cut dovetails.
No, that's true. All right. Shall we move to what we like to call our lightning round? So this is the first time we're doing the lightning round. What's that?
Our long-running segment, our lightning round.
So this is going to be a lightning round.
I'm very
and we've
nervous.
never done this before. And Mary is absolutely terrified because I didn't tell her what I'm going to ask her. And I'm going to ask her to react to the question and answer it in short order. No long, drawn out, boring ass answers. I want quick gut instinct. You're going to have like 5 seconds to answer. All right. And it's a series of questions that bears on today's topic.
I can blame the hesitation on the poor internet.
Are you ready for the lightning round, Mary?
Yes.
No, you're not. Okay, ready?
Wait, are we responding at the same time?
I'm going to ask you first and then Eric on the first question. You ready? Here we go. Number 1, you make a mission piece of furniture, but base it on your own design. So it's not like any other piece that's been built before in that particular vein of mission style furniture. Is it art or craft? Mary?
What is mission style?
Well, let's stickly, or or let's say green and green, or whatever style you want to pick. You make a piece in that style, but it's not based on any one piece that exists. It's new. Is it art or craft? Eric?
I would say art. Might be boring art, but it's art.
Interesting. So I guess I would say I'm sort of like 50-50. I know that's kind of a cop out, but it definitely is in line with the tradition, but it's a new piece. So I don't know. I'd give it both. Second, Eric, you first. Oh, this one's going to upset people. Is art above craft because it is inherently more difficult to move the emotional needle?
No, I think it's impossible to separate the two. I think you can't be an artist without having exceptional craftsmanship. And the director of MoMA can, get fucked.
If it's the current director, no, I don't know which director it was.
Who the current director is, so.
Mary, is art above craft?
No.
Okay. Follow-up question. Eric, is art more difficult than craft?
I think it takes more time. I don't know that it's more difficult.
Mary?
No.
I tend to think it is more difficult because it demands so much more of me than just execution. It's execution plus like much more. Okay. Next question. Mary, you first. Are artists cockier than craftspeople?
Yes, I am biased because I come from a world full of design and artists, and I see a lot of ego. So maybe I'm biased because I'm not as much in the craftsperson world. But
okay, Eric, are artists cockier?
I would say the stereotype of the artist is cockier, but if we're expanding the definition of craft to anybody who is really good at what they are building. I grew up in the trades. I can't say that artists are cockier than craftspeople, man. We're all human and we all suck the same amount.
When you define yourself as, Eric, that's the cockiest.
Oh, slam.
Okay. All right. Listen, I love me. You're not wrong.
Okay. I think frequently artists are cockier than craftspeople because they think they're all fancy. Typically, but let's hope they check their ego at the door. Finally, Mary, are we all craftspeople on our journey towards making art?
This is such like a existential question. Yes. I think undoubtedly yes.
So you have to. It's like part and parcel. Eric?
Yes.
Mary, sorry, I interrupted you, Mary. Please.
I was going to say, I don't know if it's necessary, but I think it should be part of it, in my view.
Oh, Eric, you raised the question. Can you just be an artist and just skip over the crafts part, the craftsperson part?
Yeah, I mean, let's. If we're taking the economics into the situation, yes, you can. If you are attempting to make things that people connect with on an emotional level and make art with a capital A and contribute beautiful with a capital B things to society, I don't think you can. I think you can be a con man in any field you want. I don't think that you can make art that moves people without an understanding of craft. Now, craft can also be expanded to like word craft. I'll take Damien Hirst's The Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living as art because the craftsmanship of that statement in conjunction with the object itself, I think is art.
This episode is going to piss off a lot of people, by the way.
Yeah, just because my definition continually shifts throughout this episode.
Yeah, but I'm like the people who consider them artists because they have painted a few times or they're, I don't know, epoxy.
Well, so that goes back to the mission question, the Stickley question, right? Like if you have somebody painting a landscapes, the same landscape could have been painted 1,000 times, but that person paints the landscape and nobody's going to say it's not art because it's paint on canvas.
I think you can make art without having a mastery of craft. I think there's probably examples. I can't think of any off the cuff, but I bet people have thought of a way to make something that moved someone very substantially and did not have a mastery of the topic that they did it in. I'm sure that has happened.
Mastery may be a strong word,
Well,
but
a
a
strong sense of
functioning
craft.
understanding, right? Strong sense, and it could
I
be
don't
an
know.
intuitive sense.
Maybe. Don't try to
Maybe.
qualify it after the fact. Get out of here. All right. On that note, now that Eric's been a bad boy, it's time to punish him with his favorite segment and your favorite
Jesus.
segment.
Wait, do you want to mention Patreon?
Oh, yeah. Let's mention Patreon. So, in the liner notes, we're going to have a link to our Patreon page. And our Patreon page will have 3 tiers for you to help support our show. And the 3 tiers are going to be baby bullshitters, typical bullshitters, and top tier bullshitters. Now, let me tell you what you get for each tier. So the baby bullshitter is $2 a month. And that's because you want to support our podcast and because you want to see the video feed on YouTube. So that's what we
Just
offer
a
is
little
the video
boo-boo
feed.
in the diaper.
Little boo-boo in the diaper. So that's baby bullshitter, $2 a month. Typical bullshitters are $5 a month. And of course, because you want to support us, but also you get the juicy after show where we dive into Eric's DM even further and offer these wonderful ladies and gentlemen some advice on how to get Eric's
That's worth it right there, guys.
attention.
That's a high fiber diet.
And finally, top tier bullshitters get the YouTube feed, they get the after show, but they also get to propose questions that we may answer submit questions that we may answer in the after show, or if you have questions about us or you want to contribute to the conversation, and we'll get to those questions as we can. So those are the 3 tiers: baby, typical, and top tier bullshitters. Link to
I
our
have a
Patreon
poop
page
joke
will
for
be
top tier.
link to our Patreon page will be in the liner notes, and we would appreciate it if you'd support this, just to defray sort of our costs of production and hosting and all that. Okay, so that's Patreon. Now to what we really want to get to.
I like how we ask people for money after what is like the sloppiest and most confusing conversation we've had yet.
I don't know that there's I don't know that there's clear-cut answers to this, but at least we asked the question.
We did. All right, let's slide.
All right, here we go.
People's thoughts, by the way.
Wait,
Yes.
Say that, Mary? What's that?
We'd love to hear people's thoughts on the question.
Yeah. You know what? I would really enjoy it if you'd push back on some of our thinking, because maybe you open our minds to new ways of thinking, or maybe you'll just give us a response and it'll be total horseshit and we'll ignore it. But hey, you don't know until you try. On that note, here we go. The slide.
The slide. We're gonna slow things down, draw a bath, pour some wine, light some candles, because we're sliding into Eric's DMs.
Oh, yeah.
Emoji.
What do we have on tap for this week, Eric? Now, you probably know because you gave me the DM, but Mary doesn't.
I don't.
No idea.
I don't remember what I sent you.
Oh, good. Well, we have one. Oh, just another absolute fucking gem. Are you guys ready?
Hit me.
Brace yourself.
Hey, Eric. Please give me a chance. I know all the different types of plywood.
I love
I forgot about that one.
My God.
So
I gotta be honest.
Thirsty.
That was such a good DM. That was so funny.
Can we play it again? I'm going to play it again.
Hit me.
Hey, Eric. Please give me a chance. I know all the different types of plywood.
That's amazing, Eric. How many different types of plywood are there?
We could ask her. I don't know.
In your pants. Like, how many types?
It's at least a 7-ply down there.
All right, let's discuss this in the after show.
Oh, God. Okay, well, we'll be
What
discussing.
an opener.
We'll be discussing how many types of plywood are in Eric's pants in the after show. Let's start with that thought. Again, thank you both for your wonderful Eric, especially your non-committal, muddy-ass answers about the line
You're
between
welcome.
craft and art. And
Brain.
and and I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it made you think and at least think about: is there a distinction? Does it matter? Does it even matter what the distinction is, if there is one? I think it's just nice to think about these topics. And do you consider yourself an artist or a craftsperson? And does it matter? All right. With that, we're going to sign off. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, friends.
Yeah.